From the moment you are old enough to understand the world around you, society begins planting a quiet message in your mind. Being alone is something to avoid. It presents solitude as a warning sign, a flaw, a deficiency. You hear it in conversations, in movies, in school environments, and even in your own family's expectations. You are taught that being surrounded by people is the goal, that having a large social circle is proof of your worth, and that isolation means something is wrong with you. This conditioning runs so deep that by the time you're a teenager or an adult, you may start believing that if you're alone, it means you're failing at life. But this idea, this fear, does not come from truth. It comes from a society that is uncomfortable with anyone who steps outside the system. The real reason society discourages solitude is because solitude creates independence. When you spend time alone, you begin to think for yourself instead of simply absorbing the noise around you. You start questioning the beliefs you were given. You start noticing which desires are truly yours and which were implanted by pressure, advertising, or comparison. Most importantly, you start discovering the strength you carry within you, strength you may never notice when your attention is constantly pulled outward. Society thrives when people stay busy, distracted, and dependent. But solitude breaks that cycle. It returns you to your own mind. Another reason society tries to keep you from being alone is because solitude removes the need for approval. When you are surrounded by people all the time, your identity becomes shaped by their reactions. You start molding your decisions to avoid judgment, conflict, or disapproval. But when you spend meaningful time alone, you discover that you don't need constant validation. You begin to feel comfortable with your own company. You begin to develop self-respect that isn't based on how others see you. This makes you harder to influence, harder to manipulate, and harder to control. Independence is threatening to the systems designed to keep you compliant. So society teaches you that being alone is scary, when in reality it's the path to reclaiming your power. And then there is the truth most people overlook: solitude increases awareness. When you are always surrounded by noise, you can't hear your inner voice clearly. Your thoughts become a mix of everyone else's. But in isolation, the mind becomes sharper. You observe more. You understand more. You start recognizing patterns in your life, realizing what drains you and what nourishes you. You become conscious of your emotions instead of running from them. You start healing from things you never had time to face. This clarity is rare, and society doesn't encourage anything that makes people deeply aware of themselves, because awareness leads to change. When you allow yourself to step away from the noise of the world, something begins to shift within you. Slowly at first, then unmistakably. Solitude becomes a mirror, one that reflects you with clarity you may have never experienced before. And what you discover in this mirror is something society rarely talks about. Being alone is not an empty space. It is a powerful environment for transformation. It is where the layers of external influence fall away. Not because you force them off, but because silence reveals what no one else can show you. The first truth solitude reveals is the depth of your inner world. Most people never explore their inner space because life keeps them externally focused. There is always someone to talk to, something to scroll, something to chase, something to distract them from themselves. But when you remove distractions, you begin to realize that your mind has far more to say than the world ever allowed you to hear. Thoughts that were drowned out by noise rise to the surface. Questions you never asked yourself begin to appear. You start to examine the motives behind your decisions, the fears behind your reactions, and the desires behind your ambitions. You see that many of the things you thought you wanted were simply echoes of the world around you, not reflections of your own truth. Another truth that emerges in solitude is emotional honesty. When you are constantly surrounded by people, you learn to hide your true emotions. You suppress sadness to appear strong, hide confusion to seem confident, and silence vulnerability to avoid judgment. But in solitude, you have no one to perform for. There is no audience. There is no pressure to appear a certain way. You are free to feel what you truly feel without interruption. This emotional honesty is not always comfortable, but it is healing. It allows you to process experiences instead of carrying them. It allows you to understand your emotional triggers instead of being controlled by them. It allows you to finally listen to the inner wounds that have been asking for your attention for years. Solitude also reveals your natural rhythm, your own pace of thinking, moving, living, and being. The outside world pushes you to rush, to work faster, to multitask, to compete. This constant pressure disconnects you from your own internal timing. But when you spend time alone, you begin to rediscover it. You notice how your mind functions when it's not overwhelmed. You notice how your creativity flows when it isn't forced. You begin to recognize which activities drain you and which ones recharge you. The discovery of your natural rhythm becomes the foundation of self-mastery, because it teaches you how to live in alignment with yourself instead of in survival mode. And then there is the deepest truth of all. Solitude brings you back to your inner power. Without realizing it, many people live their lives giving their power away to other people's opinions, to societal expectations, to fear, to insecurity. But when you step into solitude, all of that falls silent. What remains is the raw, unfiltered version of you, the version that exists beneath conditioning, beneath fear, beneath ego. This is the version of you that society doesn't want you to meet, because once you do, you become someone who can no longer be easily influenced. Solitude is not an escape from life. It is the place where you find yourself so that you can return to life with clarity, strength, and authenticity. When you begin to embrace solitude and understand its power, something profound happens inside you. You become independent in a way society cannot easily influence. And this is exactly why society fears people who are comfortable being alone. Independence is not simply the ability to take care of yourself. True independence is internal. It is the ability to think without being told what to think, to choose without seeking approval, and to stand firm even when the world tries to pull you into its noise. This level of independence makes you unpredictable, uncontrollable, and deeply self-aware. Society prefers people who move in predictable patterns, patterns shaped by trends, by pressure, by expectation, and by fear. But a person who is comfortable in solitude doesn't follow those patterns anymore. One of the biggest reasons society fears your independence is because independent individuals are harder to manipulate. When you don't need validation from others, you cannot be easily pressured into conforming. You are not controlled by the fear of being judged or rejected, because you've already learned to be comfortable with your own presence. Advertisers, institutions, and even social groups rely on your insecurity to influence your choices. They need you to feel incomplete without them. But solitude shows you that you are already whole. The moment you realize this, you step out of the cycle of constant comparison, craving, and consumption. Society loses its grip on you because you no longer chase the things it uses to keep people distracted. Another reason society fears your independence is because solitude awakens critical thinking. When you are constantly surrounded by noise, your mind doesn't have the space to question. You absorb information without inspection. You repeat beliefs without understanding them. But in solitude, your thoughts slow down enough for you to analyze what you've been taught. You begin to see contradictions in the world. You notice when something doesn't feel right. You recognize manipulation, illusion, and unnecessary pressure. This level of awareness disrupts conformity. Society functions smoothly when everyone follows the same ideas without questioning them. But a person who thinks deeply is a person who chooses differently, and that choice threatens the system. Independence also scares society because it breaks the need for external identity. Most people define themselves through their roles. their relationships, their social circles, or their achievements. These external identities make them easier to categorize and predict. But solitude helps you discover an internal identity, one that exists even when you are not performing for anyone. When you know who you are at your core, you become immune to the world's attempts to label you. You don't need titles to feel worthy. You don't need crowds to feel important. You don't need attention to feel seen. This inner stability disrupts a system that relies on insecurity to function. Perhaps the most powerful reason society fears your independence is because independent people inspire change. When someone becomes comfortable being alone, they begin living in alignment with their truth. They make decisions based on purpose instead of pressure. They choose relationships based on connection instead of loneliness. They pursue paths that feel meaningful rather than socially approved. This authenticity is rare and it is contagious. Others feel it, others notice it, others begin questioning their own lives because of it. And society cannot control a population that begins thinking and feeling for itself. This is why society discourages solitude, not because being alone is dangerous, but because the person you become in solitude is powerful beyond measure. Section 4. The strength you gain from embracing solitude. 500 words. When you stop fearing solitude and start embracing it, something extraordinary begins to take shape within you. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, and it doesn't come with fireworks or sudden revelations. It arrives quietly, like a slow sunrise. You begin to sense a strength inside you that was always there, but never fully awakened. This strength is not physical, it is emotional, mental, and spiritual. It is the strength of someone who no longer runs from themselves, who no longer depends on the world for validation, and who no longer needs noise to feel significant. This strength is the foundation of a life lived with clarity, purpose, and inner stability. The first form of strength solitude gives you is emotional resilience. When you spend time alone, you learn how to face your emotions instead of avoiding them. You become familiar with the deeper parts of yourself, your fears, your insecurities, your wounds, and your desires. You stop hiding from them and start understanding them. This emotional maturity makes you far more stable in the world. You don't crumble when someone leaves. You don't lose yourself when things fall apart. You don't panic when you feel sadness or uncertainty. You've already sat with those emotions in solitude, and you've learned how to navigate them with patience and compassion. This is the kind of resilience that many people spend their entire lives chasing through others, but you discover it within yourself. The second strength solitude gives you is mental clarity. When the noise of the world fades, the fog in your mind begins to lift. You start seeing situations more clearly. You begin to understand what truly matters and what is just noise. Decisions that once felt heavy become easier because your thoughts aren't entangled with the opinions of others. You begin to trust your inner guidance system, the intuition that was always there but drowned out by distraction. With clarity comes direction. With direction comes confidence. And with confidence comes the ability to build a life that reflects your truth, not society's expectations. Another powerful strength solitude brings is self-reliance. This isn't the type of self-reliance that isolates you or makes you reject connection. It is the kind that allows you to connect deeply, authentically, and without fear. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you stop seeking others out of loneliness. You seek them out of genuine connection. You stop forcing relationships and start recognizing which ones nourish you and which ones drain you. You no longer depend on others to fill emotional gaps because you've already filled those gaps within yourself. This makes your connections healthier and your boundaries stronger. But perhaps the greatest strength solitude gives you is spiritual awareness. The awareness of being more than your roles, more than your fears, and more than your circumstances. In solitude, you begin to sense a deeper dimension of yourself, one that is calm, expansive, and untouched by the chaos of the world. You discover a peace that doesn't depend on anyone or anything. This inner peace becomes your anchor. It remains with you even when life becomes turbulent. It becomes a source of wisdom that guides your choices, a source of energy that fuels your growth, and a source of calm that protects your mind from the world's pressure. In the end, the strength you gain from solitude is not about distancing yourself from life. It's about returning to life with a sense of power, clarity, and authenticity that cannot be shaken. Solitude doesn't make you lonely. It makes you whole.